Hey everybody, what's going on? Danny Koker here, aka The Count. You're watching Count's Customs YouTube channel, and I hope you are enjoying it, and I hope you subscribe. Right now, we're going to do another segment of Count's Finer Details, and I want to talk about one of my personal motorcycles, and arguably my favorite in the motorcycles that I have is right here. This baby, her nickname is Coffin. Now, the reason that it's nicknamed that is because of the old school 70s Coffin tank, gas tank on it, and the fact that, you know, I got such a vampire vibe. I really dig the whole name there. Coffin just works out really good on this bike. But I got to tell you about this bike. This bike is really special. This is a bike that Shannon, my lead builder, and myself worked on together hand in hand, and we built this bike way back in 1997. So this is actually my second long bike. The first long bike Shannon and I built together in 1996. And knowing me, I go a little crazy sometimes. I go a little overboard. So when we built that bike, her nickname is Tattoo for obvious reasons, and I'll have to show you that bike sometime in the future. It's such a show bike. It's such an outrageous show bike that even though it's a wonderful riding bike, it's scary to park it anywhere. Everybody's got to, you know, come around it, look at it, touch it. Makes you crazy. So it's the kind of bike that I don't like to get out of my sight, which prompted me to build the second long bike here, which prompted me to build Coffin. And Coffin is tough as nails. And I'll get to the reason why this is the kind of bike that you can leave parked out front somewhere, and if somebody touches it or whatever like that, it's actually not that horrifying to me. So and I'll explain that later. But in the meantime, let's talk a little bit about this bike. This bike is a beautiful bike. Like I said, Shannon and I built this baby back in 1997, and we started with a Chopper Guys frame. It's a rigid frame, hardtail frame, which means there's no rear suspension at all on this bike. To get any kind of minute amount of suspension, you let a little bit of air out of your back tire, you know what I'm saying? So you get a little bit of a bounce out of that. So I like that. The frame has been stretched 6 inches in the down tubes. In the part that goes up and down, that's the down tubes. It's been stretched out 6 inches. The backbone of the frame, which is the top of the frame where you mount your gas tank, things like that, it's been stretched 4 inches. And then the neck, which is where the front end mounts, we cut completely off and raked it out, which means we changed the angle, laid it out to a full 50 degrees worth of rake. So with the 6 inches of stretch in the down tubes and 4 inches of stretch in the backbone and 50 degrees worth of rake on the neck, that allows us to accommodate this absolutely stunningly gorgeous Sugar Bear Springer front end. And this front end is 30 inches over stock. That's correct, you heard me correct, 30 inches over stock. The bike, from the very front to the very back, is a little over 11 feet long. That's a long bike. But the Sugar Bear front end is so amazing, the way that he sets them up. The front rockers are designed to work in conjunction with the length of the bike, with the rake of the bike, and if you do the math right, you run it at 0 degrees worth of trail, which means it's a very neutral front end as far as weight is concerned. Technically, long bikes tend to be a little heavy to ride, a little heavy to steer and things like that. Front ends are heavy on them. A lot of flop, a lot of drop. Not this bike. This bike is very neutral in the front end. Frankly, it's lighter than a stock Harley would be in the front end. And you can ride this bike with one hand. You can make U-turns on this bike with one hand, and it just rides fantastic. Another one of the reasons why I love this bike so much is because for me it's very minimalistic. It's a chopper. This thing is cut down to hardly anything. There's not a lot going on here. And I talked about the finish on this bike. You don't see me ever touch paint jobs. I'm not that way. There is no paint on this bike. It's outside of the pinstriping. The frame, the tin, all of it is all wrinkle finish powder coat. It's as tough as nails. It's been on here since 1997, and there's not a mark on it. And then Ryan, my man, did some beautiful, beautiful hand-done pinstriping on the bike to complement the flavor and the colors of it. And of course, being the vampire guy that I am, and being the Coffin style bike that it is, if you look and notice, a lot of this beautiful artwork has very much a vampire theme throughout it. It's beautiful stuff, but it's a very minimalistic bike. There's not a lot here, and that's one of the reasons why I absolutely love this machine. Let's talk a little bit about the drivetrain on this motorcycle. She's got an 80 cubic inch Evo motor. You heard me straight, 80 cubic inch Evo motor. Why am I riding merely an 80 cubic inch Evo motor? Because it runs all day long and gives me zero problems whatsoever. Big inch motors are a blast. They're great. They got all kinds of power. They're fantastic. But I like to ride, and I like to ride a lot. I like to put down some miles. Shannon actually built this engine and did a fantastic job building this engine. Since 1997, we have never had to open this engine up for any reason whatsoever. I've ridden this bike everywhere. This thing's been to Sturgis, this thing's been to Daytona, this thing's been to Laughlin, this thing's been to the Love Ride in Hollywood years ago. I mean, I've been everywhere on this bike, and never, ever, ever had an ounce worth of problem on it. If you notice the rocker boxes on the Evo engine, I love the look of knuckleheads. So we took retrofitted 1947 knucklehead rocker covers on the Evo engine. So it really gives it a nostalgic look, but a very modern, updated engine. Well, when I say very modern, updated, they've come a whole lot further since the Evos, but for me, you know, I'm an old school guy, so an Evo's kind of new, you know what I'm saying? Let's talk about the wheels on this baby. It's got beautiful, all stainless spoked wheels. I love spoke wheels on an old chopper. Wires are just, spokes are just the way to go on an old school chopper. I love that. The back wheel was custom made for me by a very, very cool cat and longtime friend and one of the great bike builders of our generation, a gentleman named Billy Lane. Built that back wheel for me, and it's a wicked back wheel. It's one-sided offset, so all of the spokes are tucked to the other side of the bike, and there's a reason why. I'll tell you that here in a minute. But on this side of the wheel, it's very deep dish. It's very set back. There is nothing on this side. There's no brakes on this side. There's no drive on this side. There's no anything like that, except for a big, beautiful spinner cap on the axle there, which looks way cool. So I got to tell you, this bike is a magnificent conversation piece. You know, wherever I go on this bike, people love it. They love to look at it. They love to check it out. I was even pulled over one time. Well, I've been pulled over plenty of times, but I remember one time I was pulled over by the nicest officer who just wanted to look at the bike. He's like, I haven't seen anything like that going down the road. And he goes, that thing is just too cool. So it gets a lot of attention, but you know, wonderful things about a bike like this, and frankly, any kind of motorcycles, is getting together and riding with your friends. I've been riding since I was 8 years old, and it's a whole lot of fun as you become an adult and you can ride, you know, a big boy motorcycle, and you get out on the weekends with your friends. You know, it's like those Sundays are always, you know, we're always for getting together with your brothers and going out and getting in the wind, man. Just go get in the wind. Get all your bikes together and go ride. And it's a great way to clear your head. It's a great way to get all of the headaches off you from the prior week, to clear your thoughts for the week ahead that you've got going on. And it's also a great way to build friendships and relationships and a brotherhood that really stays together forever. So having that one-sided wheel like that looks wicked from this side over here, but what's on the flip side is way cool too as well. Let's talk about the brakes on the back of this bike. It's got a wonderful setup called a Sproder setup from a Swedish company called Tolly. It's way cool because it's a final chain drive, so you got a chain. With the chain you need a sprocket, but the sprocket also happens to be the brake rotor as well. And so the caliper, the Tolly caliper, sits where the chain wraps around the sprocket, sits right in the middle, and it squeezes the rotor portion of the sprocket, called a Sproder setup. And it's way cool, and it's made by a company called Tolly, and they're out of Sweden. Great setup, a little bit challenging when it comes to bleeding the brakes because of the way it sets. But once again, once it's all set up, I've never had to do any maintenance on that back brake setup at all. It's been perfect for all of these years. It's been absolutely fantastic. The rear fender and the rear fender struts were made by Jesse James. So we all know Mr. James, and he did those beautiful spiderweb struts and that rear fender, which hugs that 210 back tire absolutely beautifully. We custom made the sissy bar that works in conjunction with those rear struts. The seat on the bike, it's kind of what they used to call back in the 70s the butt bucket. I love those kind of seats. They're really comfortable and really supportive. Customized mine, chopped it down a little bit. I'm a tall guy, I like to sit down in a bike, so I cut the seat down, both front and back seat. It's all trimmed out in black leather, and then it's got some leopard fur on the inserts because I just can't help myself. That's just how I am. But on the other side, the primary on this bike is a drive open belt primary made by a company called Koker. It's a 4-inch open belt. Way cool setup. Zero maintenance at all. You don't have to mess with it one bit. Just make sure you don't get your pants caught in it. Gotta be careful about that because there's a whole lot going on right there by your leg. But this is a bike, like I said, that Shannon and I built together back in 1997. And I ride this thing all the time. I absolutely love riding this bike. It's probably my favorite bike to ride. And, speaking of riding, I say we'll grab my lid, my gloves, some glasses, and let's take this bike out for a ride.